A mentor of mine I paid almost 20 grand to have access to recently told me something that absolutely blew out my fucking brains. I've been in business for more than 11, 12 years, and I've never heard it put in the way that this entrepreneur put it. See, everybody thinks if you want to be unfathomably rich, you have to have some major innovation, you got to reinvent the wheel, you have to do something new that nobody has ever seen, essentially, right? Some revolutionary new thing. Well, what he told me is that, and again, this guy's making about $2.5 million a month, right? So most people, don't make that in their entire lifetime, right? Given, globally. He told me, quote from Picasso actually, good artists copy, great artists steal. And again, Picasso is one of the most renowned artists, of all time, to a sense. And he very explicitly says that, most of his good stuff he just copied. So what he told me is that he basically modeled his entire business off of a guy called Sam Ovens. If you guys don't know who Sam Ovens is, he's another rich dude who now has a software company called School. It's a pretty popular software company. But again, like it's so contrary to what everybody else tells you. Everybody else tells you that you have to do something new. You have to do something that that's never before seen. But again, it's straight from the mouths of people making so much money. It's the fact that sometimes just about modeling what works. But here's the important takeaway, without which you won't be able to apply this principle properly. Steve Jobs, when we're talking about the MagSafe connector, let me grab mine right here. So you see this MagSafe connector right here. I just connected it to my laptop. Steve Jobs didn't invent this. Now, they recently introduced this to all the Apple devices. They took it away for a while. But what Jobs actually did is he found this connector in Japan. So in Japan, they used to have rice cookers, right? And they'd realize that if the damn thing was connected and, it couldn't easily be taken off, if you tripped over the damn rice cooker, all the rice, all the boiling water would fall onto you and then, fucking 12-degree burns or something like that. So what he realized is, hey, people trip over their laptop or their Mac cords all the time. So why don't we just make a magnetic cord? So again, in a sense, he modeled what he had to do, but he just took it to a different industry. And here's the thing. There's pioneers in every single business. There's pioneers that basically lead the way. And you know how you recognize them? You recognize them by the arrows in their back and the fact that their faces are dead on the ground. They're laying down dead because they've literally had to make every single mistake to actually get to the point of where they're at. The genius of most people or most great businesses that make a shitload of money is just taking a concept in one business, whether it's how they sell or the product or, a feature or whatever it is, and then applying that to a completely different industry. The principles always remain the same, whether it's marketing, sales, or whatever it is, or whatever the main thing is that they're copying. In Steve Jobs' example, it was, again, the magnetic cord. They just cross-apply those principles and apply them to a completely different industry. The way that they sell, how they position the messaging, all this other stuff. Like, they literally just copy everything, but they just sell to a different audience, right? Either a hungrier audience or whatever it may be. Let me give you another example. There's something called a webinar, right? A webinar is basically a sales presentation that you compose to educate your prospect and lead them down to the sale, right? You basically hold their hand, show them the process, and then sell them the actual implementation. So that's what a webinar is. Now, a lot of people used to basically model their presentations after Steve Jobs, because how did Steve Jobs sell Apple? A lot of people, may know this. He used to have a presentation every single year where he used to get on stage and he used to sell his new products. And there's a framework that he followed every time. Now, a lot of people may not know this. Warren Buffett, when he was pitching to investors, actually had the same thing. He had a presentation. So now, basically, like this framework of having a sales presentation that basically sells one to many, that educates the prospect and leads them through the sales journey. This has been seen across literally every single industry that you can imagine. But taking it and applying it to a specific industry using the same framework that all these greats had is what basically makes people a crap load of money. Just as an example, now you have things like VSLs, video sales letters. if you actually follow the proper framework in a VSL, again, it educates the prospect to the point where they want to buy your thing. But at the end of the day, you're still taking something that's already been done a multitude of times by another person and then applying it to your own industry. So it's actually very surprising to see a lot of entrepreneurs today that literally in an act of arrogance think that they're innovators, they're pioneers, and it's attached to their ego. And I was one of these people, because if you look at my company Compass here, what we essentially do is we hold entrepreneurs accountable. Now we wrap it up in different ways, because at the core of it, nobody really wants to be kept accountable. You know what I mean? So, we flower it up and, we change up all the words, but at the core of it, we hold entrepreneurs accountable. It's basically a new market. The thing that I recognize is that, look, there's so much information out there. Information has been democratized. You go on YouTube, you can pirate a $15,000-$20,000 course. That basically the gap between an entrepreneur who has an idea, who has the information, and their dream outcome, which is actually making money, it's just execution. And how do you execute with live dedicated accountability? Now, for a long time, I thought I was a special snowflake because I was in a new industry and I was a pioneer and I was an inventor and an innovator. But it wasn't until I realized that all the same principles that apply to every other business apply to the same business that I'm in, that we actually had our first profitable month. I still remember, I think we made about 12 grand that particular month. And that was after like months and months of just dry, mundane, fruitless work. Got absolutely nothing out of it. And the thing that I knew a person who was doing pretty well, that I'd met in like one of these groups that I was in, and I'd literally just looked at their VSL and I just copied it. I modeled my entire thing after them. I looked at their ad and I was like, okay, I'll just model their ad. And then, they were gracious enough to show me their cold emails, and cold email is the main mechanism that we currently get clients with. And I just copied their email. Now they were selling something else to someone else. But again, the structure, the type of pain that they brought out, the way that they spoke, the way that they educated their audience, all of this stuff, I just applied to a completely new industry and basically made money. It was as simple as that. And I thought that I had to, because I was in this new industry, reinvent the wheel. So even if you are in an industry which you think is unsellable, I was recently, looking at a business called Optimability. They have such an interesting offer. All they do is they basically place chefs, house managers, and trainers for like high-level executives, right? Such a niche industry, basically, right? Such a niche service that they're providing. Like, the fundamentals are still the same. You have a presentation, right? You basically have a bunch of pain points for the prospect. You build the presentation. You have an irresistible offer that speaks to either health, wealth, or relationships. For them, it was wealth because they positioned it in this way. They were like, hey, if you're cooking your own food, if you're doing your own laundry, and if you're cleaning your own house, this is how many hours you're spending. And if you make this much money, then this much time is costing you X amount of money. Right? So let's say that, you're making like $400 an hour and cleaning your house, doing the laundry, all this stuff takes you like 20 hours, even a month, right? So 300 times 20 is what? 300 times 20. Let's do the math here. That's $6,000. So would you pay $3,000 one time to save $6,000 every single month? It's a pretty good deal. But again, positioning it that way, like who'd they take it from? I saw their offer structure. They literally copied another dude, right, who was selling, basically client acquisition systems. He was like, I'll get you more clients. And he was like, oh, I'll help you save this much money because right now you're losing this much money not knowing how to get clients. He took that exact same concept, applied it to this unscalable industry, and now they do a shitload of money. They make a decent amount. So yeah, just an insight for you today. Sometimes when you're trying to be this revolutionary inventor, this innovator, like it's not beneficial in any way, shape, or form. Sometimes the best course of action is to find what works, even if it is in your industry. But a lot of times finding stuff that works that isn't in your industry and then applying it, to where you're at. Fundamentally, It's all the same. You have to have value that you provide. You have to have a problem that you solve. You have to show your prospect a clear path to solving that problem, and then offer them the solution via your service. That's basically it. Ciao.